Hi, hoping you're all well. It's Judy Bartkowiak with something from Secrets of the NLP Masters. This is a book that is currently being updated. I did all the updates before Christmas, and I believe it's being reissued by Hodder Education later in the year. I think they're expecting it to come out in September. I'm not sure it's going to be called Secrets of the NLP Masters. They wanted to call it Lessons of the NLP Masters, which is a bit too serious and teachery for me. And I suggested Insights, which they liked. So I'm hoping they'll go with that. But as the author, you don't always get your own way, as those of you who are writers will probably know. Anyway, I was going back through it because at the beginning of each chapter, there are some quotes, i.e., these are the secrets, stroke lessons, stroke insights. And I was wanting to get in touch with all the people whose words I've quoted, really. Some of them, obviously, I can't because they are sort of like, Gandhi and Walt Disney and people like that. But many of them are alive, so they will be getting a little message from me to ask if they'd like to review the new book. But as I went through, there were a few chapters that I sort of particularly liked, and I'd like to share one of those with you. This one is actually chapter 20, which I guess is probably what it'll be when it comes out again. So I will sort of share pre-order details at some point. This one's called Give Feedback to Your Children. And giving feedback is enormously important, how you do it. So I thought I'd share it with you. I expect you know this already. If you don't, then that's great. And if you do, you can tap yourself on the shoulder and say, yeah, well done, I knew all that. So maybe there'll be something in here that will be interesting to you. So the chapter starts off with some quotes, which I had fun choosing, I must say. One of them is, having a 2-year-old is like having a blender that you don't have the top for. That was Jerry Seinfeld. Then, anyone who thinks the art of conversation is dead ought to tell a child to go to bed. That's Robert Gallagher. I've definitely experienced that one. And with my own 4 children, but they're now grown up, so it's more with my grandchildren now. How about this one? There's nothing that can help you understand your beliefs more than trying to explain them to an inquisitive child. That's Frank A. Clark. It is easier to build strong children than to repair broken men. That was Frederick Douglass. And a child seldom needs a good talking to as a good listening to. That's Robert Brault. I must say, one of the things I find that comes up time and time again in my therapy practice is that children feel that they're only heard if they have a problem, because on the whole, parents find it easier to fix problems and to do something rather than to simply listen. A lot of my time is spent just listening, really. So let me start the chapter. As parents or teachers, carers of children, you have a very important role to play in giving them feedback. Feedback is a gift of love that shows you care about them and have an investment in their personal development. Can there be anything worse than being ignored? Children need to know that you're paying attention to them, and they want to know where they need to make changes, because that's your job as a parent, to guide them so that they can achieve all they can in life. The giving and receiving of feedback is how we learn. At its simplest level, a stand-up comedian will adapt his program constantly to suit his audience, or her obviously, with more of what they are clapping and cheering and less of what gets no reaction. Some of them actually say, don't they? Oh, well, I'll ditch that one. We need to be a bit like the stand-up comedian and notice where we get a connection with our children when they do what we asked and are being resourceful. When they are not, we need to use feedback to get them back on track. We need to constantly be open and curious to what is working and getting a result, the result we want anyway. We are getting feedback from them and giving them feedback. It is a constant flow of energy and learning. Many people feel that they learn more from their mistakes than from successes. In fact, pupils who struggle with maths at school become excellent maths teachers because they understand how others get it wrong. As parents, we can be inclined to jump in and do things for our children, take responsibility for organising them and their free time, and even decide when and where homework should be done. Allowing children to take responsibility from an early age means that they will make mistakes, and our job is to allow them to do that and let them get the learning so that the next time they do it better. Encourage them to be curious because that is how children learn, by wanting to know more and to understand rather than being told. Feedback is how they learn, whether that is feedback in terms of a bad mark at school, losing a tennis match or football game, losing a friend, that's hard, isn't it? Missing the bus, getting a detention for homework not completed correctly. These are all feedback from which they will learn how to improve and get a better result. When these sort of things happen to children, let them get the feedback rather than believing that unless you tell them, they won't know. When we aren't introduced to feedback as learning, we can find ourselves taking it as criticism and becoming defensive, or we feel a failure and lose self-esteem. You can show your children how to respond to feedback by how you demonstrate it yourself. The best way to show them how to respond is to pause, be curious about the learning, and thank the giver of the feedback. So encourage children to give themselves feedback. We all, even children, have a nagging little inner voice that gets cross and tells us off. But every child needs to learn how to give themselves feedback in a way that they can learn from without feeling permanently stupid and losing confidence. Get them to ask themselves the following: what specifically went well today? Maybe ask them for 3 things. 2, what could have been better? 1 thing. 3, how could I do that better next time? 4, overall, what lessons have I learned? You can teach this to preschool children upwards. Encourage them to read feedback non-verbally. So ask them how they know something went well. What were the signs? Were they noticing what people said or how they looked or what they did? We have a tendency to have a preference, whether visual, auditory, or kinesthetic. So if your child generally tends to notice people's visual response to them, encourage them to also listen to what is said and done so that you can open their minds up to all 3 types of feedback. Child-friendly feedback. Feedback to children needs to be 1, immediate. There's no point in spending days thinking about it and then expecting them to remember what they did. Children have very short memories and will have forgotten what they did, why they did it, and wonder why you're talking about it days later. 2, specific. You need to draw their attention to the specific thing they did or said and what exactly they need to do more of or less of, because they won't be able to read your mind. They need to know what you want from them. 3, sincere. The feedback needs to reflect what you think and what you believe and be something they can see as of value to you. Use I to show that it is what you think and don't bring other people into it. It doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. Keep this between you and your child. Short. Avoid long sentences and lengthy explanations about why you feel like this. It isn't helpful. Use the KISS principle. Keep it simple, stupid. 5, what you do want. Avoid the word don't. Tell them instead what you want them to do, either more of something or less of something. 6, without the word but, because your positive start will be forgotten once you use the word but. Replace it with the word and. 7, accepting, because you're not a mind reader, so don't presume to know what their intentions were. Instead, give them the benefit of the doubt and look for their positive intention. For the most part, children want to please you, but their map of the world is different from yours, with other more pressing priorities, such as playing. 8, focus on the behavior rather than being a personal attack of their identity. Let's go on now to the feedback sandwich for children. Use the feedback sandwich with children. You can do this from the youngest age through to even grown-up children. The feedback sandwich starts with making a positive comment about what you've observed that is good. You may need to be very observant here because sometimes when your child is being very naughty, it can be hard to find anything positive. If your child is throwing a tantrum, you could comment on what a loud voice they have or how you notice they're good at attracting attention to themselves. Your initial positive response can be non-verbal. You can smile or touch them to show them you have a positive intention. The next bite of the sandwich is the filling. This is the main message, the piece you want to communicate to them as learning. It could be something you'd like to see more of, such as speed if they're taking their time getting ready for school, or focus on homework if they're watching TV, or consideration if perhaps they're leaving mess around the house. It could be something you'd like less of, such as noise, mess, answering back, playing video games, and so on. The filling of the sandwich needs to be delivered with a lower voice than you normally use, slower, more deliberate, and with minimum words. Children's attention span is short, so keep the message to a minimum. Finally, end on a good note and leave them with something to learn from, but also feeling good about themselves. Mention how much you love them and want the best for them, that you're proud of them and think they're great. So, putting it all together, give feedback to your children with love and focus on how they can learn from it and become the excellent human being you want them to be. Show them how to respond to feedback by demonstrating it and by being flexible about your choices of how to give and receive it, because sometimes feedback not given in a resourceful way can be demeaning and hurtful. So I'm really hoping that you found that helpful and will tune in to me again for another podcast episode very soon.